Now, in a real-world project, one of the first things you'll do when designing packaging is deciding on what type of packaging you're actually going to use. What kind of label will it have? Will it be printed directly onto the material, or will you stick something on? Will you use a wraparound or a little standalone sticker? Can you use transparent labels? Can you print directly onto the glass? Well, these are all possibilities, but in a real-world project, they often depend on the client's budget and sometimes the client's preferences. At times, you will be asked to propose what you feel would work best, but most of the time the client will have selected something and tell you what they're looking for. So for this class, before we dive into generating ideas, it would be good to establish some boundaries and some constraints. That way we'll know what we're designing and how much freedom we have. So for the example I'll be creating in this class, I've deliberately picked options that I know I can mock up in Dimension without running into any speed bumps. You know, if you came up with a really elaborate, unique box, you might struggle to find a model that's close enough to replicate that. So here's the version that we'll come to create in Adobe Dimension. And I think it's got a good balance between simplicity and being complex enough that I can teach you some techniques for customizing this along the way. So one portion of the box slides onto kind of a base, and in a tactile way, it feels very premium as well. And that's kind of an added dimension that as graphic designers, if we're used to designing digital artwork, we're not always as aware of this. But not just the way things look, but the way they feel is quite important in packaging design. Choosing the materials and even the type of packaging you'll use, as is the case here. So the sliding box, that's a really strong choice. And then you can see for the votive next to it, we're going to use, it is a glass votive, but we'll paint it kind of a matte black. We'll make the wax black as well. So it's kind of a nice uniform theme. And of course, you don't have to color it or use the same textures that I have. But in my example, there's also a kind of champagne gold theme and maybe a gold theme that I'll use as well. So I know exactly what I'll be using. If you can save out some examples, it could be that you just save and you kind of indicate one of the examples you found. That's what you're planning to do. So this here would be black glass with a label attached to the front of it. While in this example, you can see that's I think a transparent label, which gives you a slightly different effect. And then it is actually possible to print directly onto the candle glass, which is a more premium technique. So you could choose that. And of course, for the boxes, there are many different types of boxes you could choose, from something simple, something with a little window that reveals what's inside, to the sliding box that I've used. For both, we'll give ourselves the freedom to choose any color or finish we like, both for the glass and the card box. And we'll be able to use full color printing for the label. And to throw in some more complex techniques that you might find useful, we'll even allow ourselves to use gold foiling for the box itself.